So the number I've put in is $30 million. $21.5 million is for the wrongful imprisonment.
People who took part in January 6 are hoping for big payouts.
We endured a lot. Our lives are still not the same. So I don't know what kind of price you can put on that.
Even before the DOJ announced its so-called anti-weaponization fund this week.
How long were you in prison for?
Jail and prison, I combine those numbers, 1,075 days.
People like Brandon Fellows had already begun making claims for compensation.
What's the reaction within the wider January 6 community to this fund?
Some people are whining and saying it's not enough, and we're not even hearing numbers yet.
Fellows was sentenced on felony and misdemeanor charges for entering the Capitol on January 6.
Yeah, we went in there.
Seen here in a red beard costume, Fellows spoke to CNN's Ellie Reeve during the riot.
But they were smoking a bunch of weed in there.
The charges against him were dismissed after a pardon from President Trump. Now Fellows expects compensation.
According to ChatGPT and Grok, and also my knowledge of January 6 cases, I'm in at least the 3 to 5% upper tier for how terrible and also how strong of a case I have.
It's like surreal to me. I mean, look how angry I look.
Rachel Powell, a mom of 8 and a grandmother to 8, spent 3 years under house arrest. We interviewed her before she began her prison sentence in 2024.
I don't deserve this, and my kids don't deserve it. Like, have we not been through enough?
She was released last year after being pardoned by Trump.
What do you say to people who are outraged and say people like you don't deserve a penny?
A lot of people don't agree with what happened on January 6th. But when you step back and you look at somebody like me, for example, my major felony had to be struck down by the Supreme Court. It's my crime that day of breaking a window. Technically, that's a misdemeanor charge. And yet I had 3 years of house arrest, then having to endure everything I did through prison and getting a 5-year sentence on top of that. That's clearly weaponization.
Brandon Fellows still believes the lies about the 2020 election and even believes that January 6 was a setup.
But that's why I rationalize people, even violent people, getting paid for that day. Because the government set it up, and also on top of that, they stole the election.
And both Fellows and Powell remain loyal to President Trump and thankful for the so-called anti-weaponization fund.
And I feel like he has kept us in his mind, despite all the other issues that he's got to deal with as leader of the world, basically.
Are you thankful to the president?
Of course, I'm thankful. If it wasn't for the president, I'd still be sitting in that prison.
Some of these cases, January 6th, there were some very bad actors. There's no doubt about that. But there were other people who, if you look at the entire federal system throughout the United States of America, who got punished in a way that was much more harsh than typically people. I mean, besides there was a handful of people who did horrible things, but the majority of them was trespass. It was trespass. The majority was they went somewhere where they weren't supposed to go. That's a crime.
No, they were part of a mob. They were part of a mob.
But that's an incredible statement. Look, I'm just
that they just went somewhere like they went to the local 7-Eleven.
But I'm talking about the law.
I'm
talking about the
capital of the United States.
Listen, I think it was the worst day in American history. So 9/11 was the worst day in American history, but this is a horrible, horrible day. I'm not defending what happened that day. I'm being a lawyer. I'm not talking about the politics.
Okay.
I'm talking about what they were charged with and what their ultimate sentences were. There were people who were held in solitary confinement for trespass. There were people who killed themselves in prison over this. And the president has the
January 6th
as a person who's written a lot about mass incarceration, when I look across all of the ways that the Justice Department has punished people who did not deserve to be punished, put them in solitary confinement, all the things. You think that this group of people deserves $1.8 billion?
No, but I don't think it's limited to this group of people. As far as I know, I think Biden's son could go and ask for this. Say, hey, I was targeted by the Justice Department. I need my money back.
How was he targeted? Hold on. How was he targeted by the Justice Department?
I'm not saying it would be a viable claim, but I don't think the way I read the press release, it's just for January 6th.
You don't see this as obscene. I see it as absolutely obscene.
No. I would agree with
That's
the
a word
first
with a definition.
with the first senator. It's a little beyond the pale of normalcy.
It's
How about
obscene.
that?
We go back one step because this is a perfectly good debate about why would you pay money to people who are convicted criminals? There is a system already to deal with those issues. But let's just talk about the fact that we have a quote unquote settlement for $1.8 billion. Let's leave aside that it's collusive because the plaintiff and the defendant are the same person.
Yeah, that's not typical.
But then so one of the reasons you know it's collusive is not just that they're the same party. Donald Trump himself said when he brought the case saying, I know this is odd because I'm on both sides. But let's look at the merits of the case. The merits of the case were, and this was in front of the federal judge who had it in Florida, was that there was no case. The reason the IRS general counsel quit is obvious because the IRS is defending the IRS, the public, for the same type of violations and claims that are made by Donald Trump. But here, when it's Donald Trump, they pay out the money. The clear way that this case should have been dismissed is it was not brought timely. It was supposed to be made within 2 years. Do you know how much money that means that the public would owe Donald Trump? Zero. And zero is a lot less than $1.8 billion.
But it's not Donald Trump who's getting the money, correct?
But that's irrelevant.
Oh, well.
Because the money
you
is
said it's
styled.
getting to
The
Donald
money
Trump.
is styled.
Some people have argued
it's not going in his
that
pocket.
it's
That's
his
different than
allies,
him not
that
getting
he's
it.
able to then reward allies. What do you think about that with the $1.8 billion?
Well, again, according to the fund, the way it's written is it's not supposed to go to Donald Trump's allies. It's going to be a process. There's going to be people appointed by, I think, members of Congress, members of the executive branch.
The vice president stood up on stage and said the only people who haven't gotten any sympathy were the people who had stormed the Capitol and voted for Donald Trump. The vice president was saying that these were going to be Trump voters and people who stormed the Capitol for him.
On the question of who this would be, we do have a clip from Todd Blanche talking to CNN today about who this would be and if it would be people who assaulted cops. This is what he said.
One of the factors the commissioners have to consider is what the claimant did, the claimant's conduct, okay? So in the hypothetical you just described, the claimant would have to say, I assaulted a cop and I want money. So whether the commissioners will give that person money, that claimant, it's up to them, but that's one of the factors they have to consider for the very reason that was raised yesterday, which should be raised, which is that President Trump, this Department of Justice, does not stand for assaulting law enforcement.
So we still don't have a clear answer. There's clearly not if you assaulted a cop, you can't apply. You can. It's the commissioners who, again, can be fired by Donald Trump, the president, at any moment. And they get to decide who this would be. We also have reporting now that the head of the Proud Boys is going to apply for this restitution.
Look, you can be very reluctant to say that nobody deserves restitution for things that happened in the Biden administration. I'm reluctant to say that. And also acknowledge that this is obviously a gimmick designed to advantage the president's political allies, not necessarily financially, but certainly ideologically. It's not just $1.8 billion, it's $1.776 billion, because it's definitely not a gimmick. However,
he's tied it to the 250th anniversary, right?
Right. However, the president does have a point insofar as what he's doing is not necessarily unprecedented if you're talking about rewarding your ideological allies. What Joe Biden did at the very end of his presidency.
How did he reward his allies? Joe Biden?
I'm about to tell you. At the end of his presidency, DOJ, an ethics attorney, in writing, said, Joe Biden, you cannot say that you have pardoned nonviolent drug offenders. It is, quote, untrue, at the very least misleading. And that's exactly what he did. He said, I'm going to flatten individuals, render them just an avatar of a tribe, and say you're all pardoned and commuted, and this is all nonviolent drug offenders. It was not true. To say nothing of the fact that you had fraudsters, this Cuyahoga County guy, the Cash for Cars judge who was imprisoning judge. But leave that all aside.
But two wrongs make a right. I mean, let's assume that assume everything
Andrew.
that you said is true.
It is true.
So
Go check my facts.
Let's assume that. How does that make what's happened we're talking about correct?
It doesn't. And what I'm frustrated by is the degree to which you hear from some on the left when you say things that are consistent. Oh, this is obfuscation. How does that make it right? No, what I'm saying is a consistent revulsion to the abridgment of procedure, of law, and the diminution of the rule of law in this country is something we should oppose wherever it comes from. And it came from the Biden administration.
You were comparing the Trump administration to the Biden administration, and I will say, Joe Biden purposefully did not pick a attorney general that was going to do whatever he said. And frankly, we were criticized by the left on a lot of investigations because people thought we weren't bringing them too fast, because we weren't doing
the DOJ about what he was doing at the end of his term.
Let me tell you the process. The pardon attorney, their role is to make recommendations to the President of the United States on who should be pardoned. That is a recommendation. It is up to the President of the United States on who to pardon. Did the Justice Department know that Joe Biden was going to pardon his family? Absolutely not. Did the Justice Department know that Joe Biden was going to pardon the January 6th committee? Absolutely not. Would the Justice Department recommend that? Absolutely not. But that is very different.
You know better
that
than
is
I
very different
that also,
than the Attorney General of the United States, the Trump's personal lawyer, essentially negotiating a settlement with Donald Trump's attorney to help his allies and give $1.8 billion of taxpayer money to his friends.
And the procedure,
the Justice Department and the Biden administration did not do that.
Yes, and the violation of the procedure is bad, and it's bad when the Biden administration does it and when the Trump administration does it. And you know better than I, Sochi, that in writing, the Justice Department said Joe Biden did not give members of Congress who sought to advise this process the time to have
I wonder
input
if we
in.
could go back to what we're here to discuss, because it sounds to me like we may be in violent agreement. I don't hear anyone saying that this is not sort of a fig leaf for a settlement, that the plaintiff and the defendant were on the same side, and that there were valid arguments that the IRS could have asserted. So that seems like I don't hear anyone disagreeing with that's point one, which is the $1.776 billion is sort of conjured up as a way as a fig leaf to get that money. And then I don't hear anyone saying that maybe there are some small quantum of people that, not just people in J6, but a whole range of people who could deserve restitution. But if you're planning on doing this wholesale, as the president just said in the clip you played, that this was a grave national injustice and we're going to be paying all of their legal fees. And remember, he pardoned them all en masse. He did not do a triage. So I don't hear anyone here at the table saying that they would disagree with the commission saying, oh, you know what, we're going to give huge amounts of money to people who attacked police officers and did more than just trespass.
Right. It sounded like Todd Blanche was saying that that's not what the president wants, that he's on the record as saying he's not supportive of anyone attacking a police officer. I just want to talk about the two officers who brought the lawsuit.
He did pardon.
He's already pardoned the people who attacked police officers.
There's a difference between pardoning them. They already did their jail time. So there's a difference between pardoning them.
They haven't done it all.
Okay, but they did a 4 years ago, 3 years. The two officers who said they were bringing a lawsuit, and I'll defer to Andrew and my colleagues here, I don't think they have standing to bring a lawsuit. You have to be harmed. So the fact that there's money that's going to people that could harm them, there's not a controversy. To bring a case, there's got to be some controversy. It can't be, there might be a controversy, this might lead to somebody harming me. So I think on a summary judgment motion, if they bring that lawsuit, it'll be dismissed.
We have to go to break, but quick question just for my clarification. But what if they were there that day and were emotionally harmed? Does that count?
So I actually agree that the argument for standing, because it turns out, not every taxpayer could say, oh, I want to sue because you're using my taxpayer money. That's under the law, you would be basically opening up the courts to just myriad lawsuits. So here I agree that the reason that these people say they're individually hurt is pretty weak.